Hi everyone, my name is Rose Power, and in this tutorial we are going to show you how you migrate your stream target workflow from the Akamai CDN over to the Fastly CDN. The reason we are going to show you how to do this migration is because support for the Wowza CDN on Akamai is being removed from Wowza Streaming Cloud. So as of April 18th, our native integration with Akamai will no longer function. So you must convert any streams that you have that are using Wowza CDN and Akamai to Fastly, again, by April 18th. So joining me for this tutorial today is our Director of Sales Engineering, Tim Doherty. Hey, Tim, how are
Hi,
you?
Rose. Hi. Glad to be on, and hopefully this can be helpful to all of you who are watching.
Yeah, I appreciate you helping me out with this. Can you just kind of explain how the stream target workflow through Akamai works right now and how that's going to change and how that's going to look differently when we migrate over to Fastly?
Definitely. Effectively, what's happening is we're going to no longer push directly from Wowza Streaming Engine to Wowza CDN, which is effectively run by Akamai. So we have to kind of reverse how we're doing this. So right now, today, we have a CDN, and it's called Wowza Streaming Cloud, and it has a CDN connected to it called Akamai. And then there are all over the world Wowza streaming engines. So wow, I wrote it backwards, but bear with me just for purposes of demonstration. And it's pushing to Akamai. So Wowza engine streaming, I'm being frivolous. That red line is a push to Akamai. Let me show you what that looks like in Wowza Streaming Engine, just so that you can visually understand what's going on. Right now, we
Right.
have virtually a fresh install of Wowza. I'm going to publish a stream to it right now from OBS. It's already preset. We do have tutorials on how to set a live stream up, of course, but you probably already know how to do that if you're watching this video. So right now we have a stream coming in called OBS. I can confirm that the data is there. So what if I want to push this today to the soon to be removed capability in Wowza Streaming Cloud? I would go into the stream targets, add a stream target. I would say Wowza CDN, give it a name. I'm going to call it my OBS stream. It can be anything. It's not specific. I will correct the capital T there. And then the source stream, I'm going to just do a single bitrate stream. The source stream is OBS. That's what you just saw in incoming streams. And then I can sign into Wowza Streaming Cloud. And this is one of the, it's been a kind of a cool integration. And it unfortunately for now it's going away. We may be able to make some changes in the future to continue this streamlined approach. But I choose my work group, hit add a target, and the API in Wowza Streaming Cloud actually creates an integration and a distribution with Akamai. You can see Akamai HD right here. And this here would actually play back my stream in a conventional player. So I just go to TheoPlayer's test page here, load the stream, and we should see that stream playing back, and we do. So right now, this is playing back on Akamai HD. So that's the old way that's going away.
Okay.
So now what we need to do is change how we do this, and I have to make a correction. I can't have WES in here the whole time. So let me say Wowza Streaming Engine, and then we're going to take this arrow and we're going to continue it, but it's going to go from Wowza Cloud to Wowza Engine, and we're no longer going to be using the CDN Akamai. We're going to be using the CDN Fastly.
Okay, so the original way, if you were streaming to the Akamai CDN, it was pushing from streaming engine to Akamai, and then that stream was going from the Akamai CDN to the player. But now we're going to change that where we're going to have to do a pull.
That is correct. And I am referring to a newly published article that does offer detail in how to do this. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit here, and I'm going to just kind of cover the high level of how this works. I'm not actually going to go line by line because I feel that number one, you'll get dizzy from me scrolling, but there are all of these steps here to walk you through. If it's okay with you, we can jump in and just go ahead and do the workflow where we're actually opening up Wowza to have data pulled from it by the CDN. I'll pause
Sure.
there. Does that have we successfully made the contrast between pushing and pulling, Rose?
Yes, we have, I think. And I just want to mention that there will be an option available in an article for those that do require the push option. So we will
Mhm.
refer to that article too and link to it.
I'm very glad you mentioned that. It is a little bit more of a complex workflow. We're definitely going to cover that in a separate session. But for sake of here, let's discuss and let's actually do a demonstration of what it looks like with Wowza Streaming Engine to pull video um, from the CDN. So as you saw before, I have an incoming stream here in OBS. I need to do something a little bit different. I need to create an HTTP origin application, which is slightly different from a standard live application. If you're looking very closely in Wowza Streaming Engine Manager, you'll see that this line here is actually the type of application that you're using. I'm going to create a new application where I have the option Live Edge, Live HTTP Origin. There's several VOD options. I'm just going to hit Live HTTP Origin and I'm going to call it Live, and it's preset, Live HTTP Origin. So that's a new application.
People can call that whatever they want, but just for this demo, we're just calling it the live HTTP origin.
Definitely, and many of you are familiar with Wowza and the structure that supports applications in our media server. You could call this Tim's awesome stream application, whatever. Just as housekeeping, I'm going to turn off the authentication for our TMP because I want to very quickly go over to OBS and change the settings. So I stopped it. Remember, it was streaming earlier to the live application. I'm just going to update this here to live HTTP origin, and then the stream name is OBS. So I'll apply those settings and start streaming. Looks like everything's working okay in OBS here. In incoming streams, I see that the stream is coming in present. Now, I did notice earlier it wanted me to restart. I'm going to go ahead and do that anyway. I don't think what I changed truly required a restart, but I don't want to have any problems, and this is a live demo, Rose. So right now we do have an incoming stream. It should show back up here shortly when OBS reconnects. And then there it is. And so what we need to do is pull this stream with Wowza CDN. You following me so far? Anything you're
Yes.
noticing interesting?
We need to pull this now from the CDN using Fastly.
That is correct. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that I can play back from my Wowza Streaming Engine. So you'll notice here I'm in Wowza Streaming Engine Manager, and I have what's called a fully qualified domain name. So in this case, this address here, tim-ec2 Ubuntu Tech Demos Wowza.com, it's just a generic URL that we use with our SSL for setting up connections to various servers. Yours might be a straight IP address. Yours might be an address that ends in streamlock.net, or it might be something specific to your company or the organization where Wowza is running. So it could be any variety of things. Now, one statement that I will make with regard to the IP address, we are opening port. We're asking you to open ports in your router. So when we are on that topic, there's a firewall here. And we may get into this a little bit more in our discussion. And then you also have a public IP. Public IP. And that can be dynamic. This here can change. And if you're familiar with hosting servers, particularly hosting servers maybe in a small office environment or even in a home environment, your ISP may reset and you may have to change your IP address from time to time. And what I'm about to show you is a very static configuration. So our suggestion would be to use some type of DNS management so that if that IP address changes, you can go into a DNS platform, not unlike dynamic DNS, which is very popular. Most routers support it, whereas which basically what it means is a router can go, oh, I have a new IP address, and it goes to dynamic DNS, and then whatever domain name you're using would be updated. So it's really important that you're mindful of the potential dynamic nature of your IP address. It could change, and we recommend using a domain in front of your server. Go ahead and reflect on that, Rose, because I feel like I threw a lot out there on the table.
If I understand it correctly, port forwarding, well, you need to have the correct ports open, first of
Mm-hmm.
all. And if you're using port 443 for SSL, I don't believe you can use it for two things at once. So that's one point. And I think if port forwarding is necessary for most firewalls. Did I understand?
That is correct, because this, if I refer back to my little drawing here, I should have used red for the firewall, but this has to be opened. So right now, most firewalls will not allow a connection to go through it. So the fact that, let's take this scrawny red line I'm using here, this is going to Wowza Streaming Engine because the firewall is configured to allow it. So in the article that I was referring to a moment ago, you'll see here on step 8, if your instance is protected by a firewall, you must configure the firewall. That's what we're talking about. And we recommend either port 80 or 443. If you want to get into unique ports, that's certainly a possibility, but it does require a little bit more configuration on Wowza Streaming Engine side. And by the way, we also provide a few IP addresses that are static. So if you want to create a firewall rule to protect just the security of the overall configuration, your router should only allow connections from these 3 IP addresses. So it's an added security layer that we're offering you if you do choose to open up your ports for this particular workflow.
Okay, but the idea here is that we want we want the Wowza CDN on Fastly to be able to communicate with Wowza Streaming Engine so it can pull that stream.
That's correct. Yes. And while we're still on this topic of port forwarding, because we're going to move away from it in just a moment here, there's another tool that we've used in Wowza support. It's portforward.com. It's when folks say, hey, I don't know how to open a port. Well, think about how many router brands there are, how many manufacturers. It goes on and on. This is just a utility site. It's very likely you'll be able to find your router, Netgear, Belkin, Linksys, Cisco. You'll find your brand and you'll find some instructions on how to open a port. So it's an important aspect of this workflow, just remembering that we're going from our CDN environment, our Wowza Streaming Cloud API, Fastly, using that CDN, we're enabling the power of this environment to grab video from your Wowza Streaming Engine. Let me dive into the practicals on how to do this. So right now, again, we have OBS with a stream present in Wowza, so I can see that there. I'm going to go ahead and make sure, first of all, that I can play it back from my server. So I'm going to just grab my fully qualified domain here, FQDN as we say it. Just end it right there on wowza.com. I'll copy that. And I'm going to go to, this is a TheoPlayer test site. Wowza has worked very closely with TheoPlayer, so this is simply why I'm choosing to use this particular player example, because I'm familiar with it. Let me clear the field here and I'll paste it. So there's my domain name to my server, and I know that my application is called live HTTP origin. And then the stream name, as you remember, OBS, and then I have to add that playlist.m3u8. So this convention here where you have your application name, your stream name, and if you're playing Apple HLS, which we are, you need to end it with playlist.m3u8. So this here should show me a stream that's playing back right off of Wowza server. So this is what the Fastly CDN is going to actually grab, this particular URL. So you want to set it up, Rose?
Sure.
All right. So to get it set up in Wowza Streaming Cloud, again, I'm going to make sure that I have this in my clipboard. The domain name to my server. It could be an IP address to your server, but I refer back to our dynamic IP conversation that we had earlier. So I go into Wowza Streaming Cloud. I just logged in. I'm going to do just a few steps to create the ability to pull from my Wowza server. So I go to the Advanced tab, go to Recordings. Oh, I didn't mean to go to Recordings. Go to Stream Targets, and then I create a new target. Leave it on the default, Wowza CDN on Fastly. I'm going to scroll down, select Add. I can name this anything I want. I'm going to call this Wowza Server 1 because it's just pointing to that one Wowza server. Enable a custom origin. Rose, this is very important. Say it.
Okay.
Enable a custom origin.
Make sure you check mark the box for enable a custom origin.
Thank you. Can't
Okay.
emphasize that enough. And then you'd need to choose a region. Now, this is not unlike when you set up a Wowza Streaming Cloud live stream or transcoder. You want to be mindful of where your server is or where your source is. In this case, we're talking about where your server is. It's in Northern California where it's running right now. And then, the distance. So I want to be in the United States. I'm in the United States, but if I was in Holland, I would probably choose Europe, et cetera, et cetera. And then I have this in the clipboard, the custom URL. I'll go ahead and paste that, and that's it. That's the address to my Wowza server. I'm going to hit add, and that's it. The CDN is ready to go. So now I'm ready to initiate the connection. Any questions so far?
No, I'm following along.
Okay, so just to review, custom origin URL. No, origin is where we're grabbing the data. That's the fully qualified domain. So that's going to point to my server. I'm going to go to the playback URL. And now you can see that the base URL is very different. It's going off of cdn3.wowza.com, which invokes our Fastly CDN implementation. And then here's some unique identifying string of text that our API created to make this easy. And then the application and stream name suggestion is what I'm going to build right now. So let's go ahead and just copy this text here. I'll go over to a text editor. This is the base CDN URL right here, application and stream name. Remember, it was suggested there. And then earlier, when I was playing back directly from Wowza, I was using my domain name, but then here's my application name, my stream name, etc. So I'm just going to steal that, go back to my text file, and get rid of the placeholders and paste the updated data. So when this part of the URL brings me to my Wowza server, this part of the URL tells the player this application, this stream name, and grab the playlist. And I know that's kind of a lot there, but I want to make sure it's clear.
No,
So I
it's really important to go over because if you don't have all those components, it's not going to work for you, especially the last part with the playlist.m3u8.
correct, and I always encourage folks when they're working with Wowza Streaming Engine or just these workflows in general, pay close attention to the syntax. There's often a lot of tries. Like sometimes I accidentally put another / in or something like that. So be gracious, be forgiving of yourself. It's once until you get it all set up, it can be kind of a iterative process. So I just pasted that in the player, hit play, and what I should be seeing here very shortly, and I do, is the actual playback from Wowza CDN, which ultimately is Fastly. So that's the end-to-end.
Okay, so you need to create a new stream. You need to make sure that you create it as an HTTP origin, which is one of the options in the Streaming Engine Manager. And then you need to set up your custom origin URL.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how Wowza Streaming Engine communicates with the CDN at Fastly. That's just getting the stream from Streaming Engine to the CDN at Fastly, but we still need a different URL. We need a playback URL to get it from CDN on Fastly to the viewer and their player. Is that correct? So there's two different URLs that you need to configure.
That's right, and that closes the loop. So for sake of conversation, if you put cdn3.wowza.com into a player, like it's playing right here, cdn3.wowza.com is connected to Fastly, and it can literally handle hundreds of thousands of viewers. That's the beauty of the content delivery network. Wowza Streaming Engine, which I was playing off of earlier, that has a very finite number of streams that it can handle, and it's stuck in one location. It's in Northern California. So if I were to send 200 connections to this particular server, it would probably stutter pretty badly. But a CDN distributes everything all over the world. So even though my location is in Northern California, the CDN is distributing that data wherever it has servers, and in this case, Fastly has servers all over the world, and the viewing experience is really good. So that's what we're preserving here while we're having to open ports, while we're having to deal with some IP address issues, dynamic, static, some of the networking nuances. At the end of the day, we're continuing your access to a world-class CDN Fastly, which gives you that huge ability to distribute everywhere.
It does. Okay, so I think something that's important to emphasize here is that once you create this new stream target through Fastly, you do need to update your players to use the playback URL for Fastly and make sure it's not using the old playback URL that was going through Akamai.
That is 100% correct. And I think I still have that stream target from when we demonstrated this earlier. It's not running right now, but there was this old playback URL. If you're converting from a former configuration with Akamai, this will no longer work. So you're definitely going to have to update your application logic or your HTML or your JavaScript or however you're passing those URLs to the players, because you have to have this URL now, which is running off of the new implementation. And over here in my cheat sheet, I actually have, a completed URL. So it is going to be a little bit of work. There probably are some ways to automate this, and that automation may vary based on the implementation. Maybe you could use REST API, maybe you could use some type of scripting at the OS level. But at the end of the day, you definitely need to make a change in your player URL scheme.
Okay, great. So some of the gotchas that you covered, and I really appreciate that you did, is make sure the ports are open, they can get through the firewall. If you have a unique environment set up with for DNS, make sure that you have that port forwarding straightened out, and absolutely make sure that you are using the Fastly playback URL and not the Akamai.
That's correct. I think we've covered it.
I think we did it. I think we did it. And all these steps are in our documentation, of course. And we also have additional resources if you need to do this through the Streaming Engine REST API. We have an article on that. And as mentioned at the very beginning, if you do have a stream target workflow that requires a push, we have the steps for you to do it that way. But for now, this is how you would change it from Akamai to Fastly for pull. Tim, that was awesome.
That was
Thank you.
awesome. And I look forward to the next video we're going to do on this, as time permits, on how to set up a push from Wowza Streaming Engine. Are you up for that, Rose?
I think I am. We can do it.
I'm
Okay,
looking
thanks
forward to it.
everybody. Hope that was helpful. And again, we have all the documentation here on the wowza.com website for you. Feel free to ask me a question in the forums. We have support tickets. We're all here to help you smoothly migrate from Akamai over to Fastly. Thanks again, Tim.
My pleasure.
Bye, everyone.